Tears of the Kingdom speedrunners have a problem. No, not that one. Or that one. Okay, maybe there are a lot of problems, but the main one is that this game is hard to route. When Breath of the Wild was released in 2017, large parts of the marketing focused on how open the game was, which many interpreted as being good for speedrunning. We saw the community take full advantage of that, getting sub 1 hour times just days after the game's release. Tears of the Kingdom inherits the same design philosophy, and its any % category is following a similar trajectory. It's the longer categories like all dungeons where some notable changes are making speedrun routing a lot more difficult than the previous title. The goal of an all dungeons speedrun, as the name suggests, is to beat all the dungeons, then beat the game. The definition for a dungeon being a location with a unique dungeon map that is separate from the world map, where you receive a heart container upon completion. In just weeks of its release, Breath of the Wild All Dungeons was under 2 hours and 30 minutes, with almost no glitches to speak of. But Tears of the Kingdom All Dungeons was lucky to get down to 2 hours and 40 minutes after 6 long months, despite already having many useful glitches to speed things up. Why is this? Both games use the same overworld, have the same regions, and even 4 dungeons in the same areas as the original game. The easy answer would be that the game is just longer, which is true, but there's more to it than that. Breath of the Wild is very loose with its requirements for completing goals, whereas Tears of the Kingdom requires players to invest more time into its dungeon-related quests. The easiest way to see this is by comparing each game's respective main quests. These are quests the game denotes as being part of the main story, like Sidon of the Zora or Riju of the Gerudo. Take a look at how many quests Tears of the Kingdom All Dungeons has to do compared to Breath of the Wild. The difference is pretty staggering, especially with how similar these games start. Upon completing the Great Sky Island, or GSI, many players probably expected to be given the paraglider somehow. But that's not the case, as a separate quest needs to be completed in order to obtain it. This introduces the first issue runners must tackle when trying to do an all dungeons run. The paraglider is incredibly useful, but is pretty slow to obtain right away. Players have to talk to Haz up in Hyrule Castle, watch the first of many Zelda cutscenes, then head back to Lookout Landing to meet Purah, who graces us with even more cutscenes before we're given the paraglider. Without the glider, movement becomes very limited and traversing between areas becomes much slower. However, we can speed this process up with an ability called Auto Build. The Auto Build ability can be obtained immediately after completing GSI, and is used to quickly build items that you've previously constructed. But by canceling the creation of a build while reopening the menu and then selecting the build again, you trigger a glitch known as an Auto Build Cancel, or ABC, which puts the build hovering in a relative position to Link. Hopping onto this creation and walking around can then allow you to move at high speeds in what's known as an ABC slide. It's tricky to control, but allows players to move extremely fast in any direction, or even through walls as long as you have access to the materials for your chosen build. While this glitch is patched in the latest update for the game, this video will focus on the category as it applies to the older patches, where this and other notable glitches are still possible. With ABC slides, going anywhere in the world is now an option. This sounds great, but it also introduces more complications. You can activate the glitch anywhere, and theoretically use it to get from one end of the map to the other. But unlike, say, BLSS or wind bombing in Breath of the Wild, you're much more likely to fling yourself into a chasm and die nowhere near your intended destination without the materials to set up another slide. Because of how dangerous it is, the decision to ABC slide somewhere makes you much more committed to stay in that area and do as much as possible. This isn't much of a problem at first, but quickly becomes challenging as you try to route in each dungeon. The Wind Temple in Hebra offers the least obstacles in your way to complete it, only requiring you to retrieve Tulin's Falcon Bow from a group of enemies and traveling up to the legendary Stormwind Arc. While getting the glider before coming here isn't necessary, it's quite useful as Tulin's Power of Wind allows you to move fast when used correctly with the glider, making it an easy choice for your first dungeon to complete. Similarly, the Fire Temple only requires you to save Yunobo from being mind-controlled and beating Moragia before diving into Death Mountain to reach the temple. The main issue in this dungeon comes with your equipment. Heat damage kills you pretty fast, so stocking up on fairies and duplicating them before coming in here is incredibly important. Any material can be duped by putting Link in an airborne state where he can still hold materials in his hand while paused. By sorting and closing the menu at the same time in this state, the held items will drop to the floor but also remain in your inventory. We can even do this with Zonai devices like steering sticks, which allow you to clip through walls and floors. For combat, there isn't much that can match a Lionel bow due to its incredible power, high durability, and multi-shot capabilities. However, getting a Lionel bow is pretty out of the way. There are many Lionels in the game, but the only ones that are realistically positioned to put into the route are these four. The Faron Grasslands Lionel is directly on our path to Rito Village, but its equipment is weak compared to other Lionels and would require us to duplicate the bow it drops to last the whole run, so it's not a great choice. Some routes for the any% speedrun get this Lionel in Gloom's Approach, as it's powerful and fast to get to with several forms of clipping out of bounds. Certainly a viable option for all dungeons, but this Lionel near Gerudo Desert is probably best. It checks all the boxes: strong equipment, in a region we need to be in, is fast to get to, and there's even steering sticks nearby. Even better, the lead up to this region's dungeon, the Lightning Temple, is stacked with all sorts of useful equipment. There's even a glitch here to duplicate cooked food abilities, giving us many minutes of attack up and speed up food. With all the plus sides, it would seem obvious to make this our second dungeon, then go to the Fire Temple afterwards. If it wasn't for this. The Gerudos really like Link, to the point where you won't be able to complete any quest here or even talk to anyone if you aren't wearing a shirt. Since you don't get the free shirt you're given on the Great Sky Island, you're limited to buying a shirt for hundreds of rupees, or wasting time grabbing a random tunic somewhere, or throwing out what would have been an extremely fast route to receive the Zora tunic by going to the Water Temple first. The Water Temple that resides above Zora's domain is the slowest dungeon quest in the game, as it has the most requirements of all the dungeons mentioned so far, and the order of these requirements is very strict. Runners need to go talk to Sidon, who tells you to go talk to his wife, who leads you to this man who wants you to fix an artifact, which then leads you back to Sidon, who wants you to meet with the king, who then wants you to shoot one of his scales into the lake where you can activate a waterfall to finally get to the Water Temple. Parts of this can be skipped with ABC slides, but it's still by far the longest dungeon quest in the speedrun. This is likely the only area that would be worth splitting up into two parts. After beating GSI and getting auto build, you would come here without the paraglider, use ABC slides to zip around completing the various tasks, and then leave to get the paraglider before continuing on to the Wind Temple. After beating the Lightning Temple, you'd then return here to beat the dungeon before the Fire Temple, since Zora's Domain and Death Mountain are extremely easy to travel between. It's not pretty and has a lot of challenges, but we have a route to beat all the dungeons and can now return to Hyrule Castle to beat the game. Except that the game actually has some more dungeons. After the Regional Phenomenon quest is completed, a new quest, Crisis at Hyrule Castle, is activated, which sends us to Hyrule Castle. The castle has its own dungeon map and boss that gives you a heart container at the end, qualifying it as the 5th dungeon. Then you're sent on another long quest to get to the Spirit Temple, the 6th and final dungeon of the game. This is why Tears of the Kingdom all dungeons is so much longer than Breath of the Wild all dungeons. Outside of defeating Master Koga, Breath of the Wild doesn't require you to complete any extra quests other than the Divine Beasts themselves. Thankfully, this isn't as much of a problem in Tears of the Kingdom as it would initially appear. The Crisis at Hyrule Castle is actually a great place to finish the run, as we want to go directly below the castle to get to the final battle. So we'll do it last and go to Spirit Temple beforehand. The Spirit Temple requires surprisingly little to beat, and there are many options to get here quickly. None of the quests beforehand are required, other than getting Mineru's mask in the Thunderhead. There is a quest to clear the storm in the Thunderhead, but it's thankfully not required. Instead, the requirements are to open this door with 10 hearts, or skip the door with Ascend after talking to Pura to complete the Regional Phenomenon quest. Both allow you to speak to Mineru and begin to reconstruct her body. ABC slides are used everywhere here to get all 4 body parts as fast as possible, but much of it has to be done blind since the run doesn't activate any light routes. Wait, what's going on with this rocket? This rocket is actually a big deal and sparked a complete reroute of the run on its own. Despite its looks, this isn't a normal rocket sword. It's an extremely powerful movement ability known as a pocket rocket. The only things you'll need are a rocket, 2 shields, and the fuse rune to activate a glitch known as fuse entanglement. If you attempt to fuse the rocket to your shield, but then interrupt the fusing process by opening up the rune menu, followed quickly by the shield menu and switch shields, the fuse will appear to fail, even though it did sort of succeed. If we look at our inventory, our shield does have a rocket fused with it, even though the shield on Link's model doesn't. Now, if we fuse the entangled rocket to our sword, shield surfing will activate the rocket as if it's on our shield, and by continuously shield surfing in the air, we can get bursts of speed that send us forward and upward. Even if you have to perform fuse entanglement, it's faster to pocket rocket short distances than it would be to do an ABC slide. And with how abundant rockets are in every region, it's a no-brainer to pocket rocket anywhere that would take you 20 seconds or less to get to. This changes our perspective route quite a lot. Pocket Rocket lets you skip these long waterfalls which normally require the Zora Tunic. Tulin's Power of Wind is also less useful, so beating the Wind Temple early isn't as important. The additional ways this glitch impacts the route are too much to list here, so to summarize what we've learned, these are the requirements for all dungeons to our current knowledge. With all these conditions, we can finally outline a proper all dungeons speedrun and see how fast we can go. The speedrun starts by using wings and item duping to do an unconventional route through the Great Sky Island. Afterwards, runners go without the paraglider for a bit, diving down to the depths to obtain auto-build and using ABC slides to fly long distances over the map. Going back to Hyrule Castle to obtain the paraglider and Hylian shield, which will be used to pocket rocket with near unlimited shield durability. The Fire Temple comes first before heading off to the Wind Temple, where an insane ABC slide can be done to fly from the bottom of the mountain to the Stormwind Arc, where we can break into the storm using a pocket rocket. Gerudo Desert follows up, where the quests in Karakara Bazaar and Gerudo Village can be skipped by ABC sliding to Riju straight away, and then zipping between the mirrors to open the Lightning Temple. Once inside, the power panels can be activated from out of bounds without needing to complete their respective puzzles. After Queen Gibdo is down, we make quick work of Zora's Domain and the Water Temple, skipping as many fetch quests as possible and finally heading back to Pura to complete the Regional Phenomenon quest. We're actually going to switch some things around here and do Hyrule Castle before Spirit Temple, since there's an out-of-bounds ABC slide that can be done from Spirit Temple straight to Ganon's army. It's taken a lot of research to get to where we are now, and of course will take even more to push the routes further. The community has worked for weeks testing setups, dungeon routes, and quest requirements to optimize the route. By the time you watch this video, the route will likely be entirely different, as this is basically a look into all that we knew at a single point in time about the run. New strategies and glitches are being found every day. Even new item locations will be brought up that make routers rethink everything. Although it's certainly more difficult, routing Tears of the Kingdom is an enjoyable puzzle that I'm sure we haven't even gotten close to really cracking open, and it'll be exciting to see what the future of the game looks like in the coming months and years. This has been Gymnast86 with Lowest Percent, and thank you for watching.